Hello and welcome to another episode of Game Theory, the number one MMA DFS prep show in all of the land. I'm your host, M.O.N.K, aka the Monk-Matician, and in this very episode, guys and girls, we've got UFC Kansas City with the return of Max Holloway going against Arnold Allen. I mean, we've got some absolute bangers on this card. Edson Barboza, Billy Q, co-main event. Cutelaba going against Boser, who's dropping down a weight class. We've got Chris Gutierrez, the legend killer, going up against Pedro Munhoz. I mean, and how could we forget the people's main event? Ed Herman, Zach Cummings. My goodness, who knew? I mean, the UFC just giving us fights we didn't even know we had to see. It should also be known there's 7 people on this card that have draws in their fight history. So in their UFC fight history, for that matter. So we could see some interesting results here. Either way, guys, I want to get right into the card, but first, check out DFSArmy.com. Use code M.O.N.K, M-O.N.K. Save yourself some money on a package today. There's tons of smart experts and people in the Discord giving out advice daily, winning bets, winning lineups, etc. Plays to make, all that stuff. Baseball just started. I know hockey's ending. We got NBA playoffs going on. We've got tons of sports still happening. Just because football's not on, guys, doesn't mean you can't make money playing DFS at other sports. Use code M.O.N.K. Save yourself some cash today at DFSArmy.com. And without further ado, guys, let's get right into the fights. UFC Kansas City, let's go. Fight! And the first fight of the night is going to be at women's bantamweight between Jocelyn Edwards and Lucy Pudilova. 7,600 for Edwards, 8,600 for Pudilova. I'll very quickly, hopefully, try to go over the format of the show. On the top, the very top line and the very bottom line, we have the fighter information. We have their record in the UFC, or sorry, their KO sub-decision records in the UFC. AWI is ass whoop index. That means how are they performing in their fights, basically, overall. We have their pro record, UFC record, L5 is last 5 record, and exact. As you can see for Jocelyn Edwards is 1 and 2. That means no matter what, or no matter how many fights she has in the UFC, she has 3 total 3-round women's bantamweight fights, and that's that exact record. She is 1 and 2 in 3-round women's bantamweight fights. And then you have her measurables right here, and then just some overall stats that we are going to get into. So hopefully that helps break it down. Leave a message in the comments if I forgot anything. But that overall is kind of what we're doing. So overall pacing, this is basically raw DraftKings points scored per minute for Jocelyn Edwards, 2.26, not a good number. And she's getting 4.03 put on her per minute. When she's at distance, she scores 3.23, allows just 2.27. But inside the distance, it is a very different story. 1.09 points per minute, guys. That could basically say 0. She allows over 4 points a minute inside the distance, Jocelyn Edwards. When she wins in women's bantamweight fights, 3 rounds, 76.87 points is all that she is scoring. She does score 42.47, or she allows 42.47 per win. So her opponents are scoring pretty well on her. When she loses 27.5 points, and her opponents score almost 100. So she's given up a decent amount of points, especially at 7,600. She lands 3.5 strikes per minute. Takedown defense is less than 48%. That is terrible. She spends 65.5% of her fight time fighting inside the distance, and she controls 9.5% of that fight time. So it's safe to say Jocelyn Edwards is pretty much just a striker, although at 3.23 points a minute is nothing to write home about. 76 is her ceiling. I do not have her floor on this sheet for some reason. It's probably pretty low. Let's see, 31.66. Not bad, not great. She has no wins over 100 points at the weight class and averages just 30 points per win. That's just a decision victory. Her strength of schedule is 64.55 in her last 5. You want this number to be about 70, so she is a bit subpar. In her last 5 opponent record, 55 and 29. She has yet to make the optimal lineup at women's bantamweight since 2021. Meanwhile, Lucy Pudilova outscoring Edwards basically everywhere, and outscoring her opponent in every single category as well. Almost 3 points a minute inside the distance, over 3 at distance, and 3.5 overall. She scores 90 per win. And she is 3 and 2. Actually, I should have said that. She is 3 and 2 in 3-round women's bantamweight fights. 90 points per win. 49 points when she loses, guys. So that's not a bad number at all. And she's holding her opponents to under 80 when she loses. Lands 5.37 strikes per minute, almost an 80% takedown defense. Spends 41% of her time fighting inside the distance and controls 57.5% of that time. Has a decent ceiling and a very high floor of 54.38. 2 of her 3 wins over 100 points. 43.33 bonus points per win. Her strength of schedule is a bit worse than Edwards at 62, almost 63. But she has made the optimal lineup in her one fight at women's bantamweight since 2021, guys. So that's going to do it for this first fight. This is kind of the setup of the show. I'm trying to bring you the most pertinent stats possible to help you make educated decisions when it comes to building lineups. I honestly kind of like this fight. I like the Pudilova side. I like the offense that she's been showing. I know she had a bunch of fights in the UFC, then took a break, and now is back. So in her last 5, she's 1-4. But in women's bantamweight, she is 3-2, like I said. So maybe keep an eye on this first fight of the night. It could be a sneaky little play, and nobody plays women's bantamweight fight, guys. Fight! And next up, we've got Aaron Phillips back in the UFC, going against Gaston Bolanos. Excuse me, I know I got that wrong. Bolanos does not have any Dana White Contender Series fights or UFC fights, so that's why a bunch of these numbers are 0 or no fights. He does have the ceiling and floor for the average for the division, which is bantamweight. This is a 3-round bantamweight fight. 94.81 ceiling, 24 floor. That's just the average, like I said, for the division. His strength of schedule is less than perfect, 56.92. I mean, that's well below 70. His last 5 opponent record is 38-31. He's 6-3 as a pro, 3-2 in his last 5, and this is his debuting fight in the UFC. He's going against Aaron Phillips, who has been on and off in the UFC. He's 12-4 as a pro, 0-3 in his UFC fights. I believe he has 1 fight recently and then 2 fights way back in the day. But he is 0-2 at bantamweight 3-round fights. But in his last 5, 4-1. His pacing is terrible. He's getting outscored almost everywhere. 2.5 points per minute. He gets 5.73 points per minute put on him. At distance, it's basically 0, 1.87. He doesn't allow anything. But inside the distance, Aaron Phillips has a problem. As Cheech Marin would say, he's leaking like a sieve. 0.55 points scored inside the distance. But when what he's receiving inside the distance are getting scored on him, 6 points per minute. That is an outrageous number. He has no wins in the UFC, averages 28 points per loss, and is giving up 114 when he does lose over these 2 3-round bantamweight fights. Lands less than 2 strikes a minute. That's that's awful. That is awful. 47% takedown defense is equally bad. Spent 81% of his total UFC fight time fighting in the distance. He's controlled less than 0.5% of that fight time. That is one of the worst numbers I've ever seen. Ceiling is 94. Floor is decent. No wins, so no wins over 100, obviously. His strength of schedule is terrible, but still 4.5 points better than Gaston. And let's see. 44-34 last 5. Also has not made the optimal lineup since 2020. Hasn't fought since 2020. This is a shit show, honestly. I usually don't pick the guy that is a UFC debutante, to be quite honest, but Aaron Phillips is, I don't know how you say this nicely, less than impressive. So give me Gaston Bolanos for the win, but as his debut fight, I really don't know what to expect, guys. You got to do your fight tape for this one and make your own decision. Terrible strength of schedule, just keep that in mind for the newcomer, but an almost equally terrible strength of schedule for the 3-fight UFC vet, who has 1 fight since 2020, and before that, I believe 2 in 2014. So this fight is a shit show. Anything could happen. Somebody's probably getting finished here. It might not. It might behoove you to have some Bolanos in your lineups. Fight! Next up, we've got Denise Gomes going against Dana White Contender Series alumnus, Bruna Brazil. What a fantastic name that is. Bruna Brazil, easily the best name on this entire card. Bruna Brazil is just, wow. I mean, if I told you my friend was going to introduce you to Bruna Brazil, what kind of occupation do you think that person would have? Just leave that in the comments. That's what I want to know. Brazil, I have her Dana White Contender Series stats right here. Was at strawweight, I believe. Yep, she did win that fight. Almost 5 points a minute. Allowed almost 4 points. At distance, I mean, she's just a scoring machine in that fight. 4.92 points per minute. 4.66 points inside the distance. She allowed almost 4 points a minute inside the distance as well. Scored 117.5, 4 strikes a minute, 62.5% takedown defense. So she stuffed, 5 of 8 takedowns, I assume. Spent over half of her time fighting inside the distance, controlled less than half of the grappling time. 70 points, so she got a second round finish there. 55 strength of schedule. That is very, very poor. Her last 5 opponents' record, 29 and 26. And it says times optimal. She did not have a chance to make the optimal. That's just, so she's 0-0 in optimal lineup. This is her first UFC fight, obviously. And she is $9,300, it should be noted. Going against Denise Gomes, $6,900. She is 0-1 in the UFC and 0-1 in 3-round strawweight fights. Only 23 years old here, it should be noted. Very bad pacing, almost at the Lewis line, 2.18 points a minute, allowing 4.3 back at her. She's getting outscored in every category. At distance, inside the distance, it's almost 2 to 1 for her opponents over her scoring. She has no UFC wins, I said, 32, almost 33 points in a loss, and she gave up 94 when she did lose. She landed 1.27 significant strikes per minute. That is an absolute dog shit number. 20% takedown defense, another dog shit number. Spent 83.5% of her time fighting inside the distance and controlled just 44% of that time. So very similar numbers control time-wise to Bruna Brazil. Very low ceiling, decent floor. 62 strength of schedule, which is bad, but 7 points higher than Bruna Brazil's. 42 and 22 is her last 5 opponents' record. And obviously, in a loss, she did not make the optimal lineup. Yeah, some pretty bad stats here for Denise Gomes. She has only had that one fight. And who was that against? Let me just double check. I should have this pulled up already, but I don't because I'm professional. Let's see. Loma Lookboonmee. Unanimous decision to her. She scored 32 points in that fight. Loma scored 64, 94. I like Bruna Brazil here. I'm interested to see what she can do, and I need to be sold on Denise Gomes here. Gomez, excuse me. Those numbers are very bad. Those pacing numbers, I mean, we're barely above 2 points a minute. I don't like that at all. So give me Bruna Brazil here, 9,300. It's going to be a rough week for dogs, I think. But she is a newcomer. We don't know how she looks after, let's see, after one round. Let me just see how many fights real quick before we get out of here. She has 9 total fights. Round 2, only one fight. Well, it could, only one fight out of her last, 9 has gone shorter than 1 round. So she might have some decent cardio here. I like her possibilities over Denise Gomes, and I think she can score pretty well. So give me Bruna Brazil for the awesome name, and hopefully the win. Maybe a decent DraftKings score as well would be nice. Fight! And here we have Lando Vannata back again. He's only 31 years old. Can you believe that? $7,700 this week. 12-6-2 as a pro. 4-6-2 in the UFC. 2-3 in his last 5. And in 3-round lightweight fights in the UFC, he is 3-5 with 2 draws. So one of the 7 fighters on this card that have draws. 2 fighters have more than 1 draw on this card, which is very rare to see. But we've got Vannata here. Like I said, the dog coming in this week, $7,700. He scores less than 3 points a minute, gets outscored. At distance is 2.5, and inside the distance, he scores almost 4, but he's getting 6 points a minute put on him at distance, guys. When he wins, not a great number, 95.73. When he loses, he only gives up 85 on average. 4.58 points or strikes per minute landed, very good number. Another subpar takedown defense, though, 58%. Spends only 19.5% of his time fighting inside the distance. Controls only 1/3 of that fight time. Has a decent floor and an okay ceiling as well at 114. 2 of his 3 wins at lightweight he has scored over 100 points, which is fantastic for the $7,700 salary. That is almost a guaranteed optimal lineup spot. Let's see, 70 bonus points per win on average. That's an average of a second round finish over his 3 lightweight wins. Strength of schedule is the best one we've seen so far at 70.29, so a respectable number there. 86 and 38 are his last 5 opponents, and he has not fought or has not had a chance to make the optimal lineup at lightweight since 2021. Meanwhile, the other side, we have the favorite, 0-1 in the UFC. I hate when guys lose their debut fight and then they come back as a favorite the next fight. It really generally makes no sense to me, but we're going to give Daniel Zellhuber another shot, apparently, at being a favorite. He's not 9,400 this week, but he is 8,500. And in his one fight against Trey Ogden, he looked very poor. 1.4 points per minute, rather. 1.45 points inside the distance, or at distance, and he scored 0 points inside the distance while allowing 10 points a minute. Gave up only 64 points in that loss, scored only 20, 3.5 strikes landed per minute, 89% takedown defense. It did not matter in that fight. Very little time spent inside the distance, and he controlled 0 of that time. Has a strength of schedule of 66.26. His last 5 opponents pro record, 50 and 26, and obviously 0-1, making the optimal lineup. Zellhuber 12-1 as a pro, 4-1 in his last 5, but off to a rocky start in that loss to Trey Ogden, which everyone had Daniel Zellhuber in their lineups, except for me. Somehow I had very low exposure to him that week. I don't know if that was an error or I can't remember why I would have done that, but yeah, so that was lucky for me. I'm not trusting him again. I mean, even against Lando Vannata, I'm going Vannata until I can actually see what Daniel Zellhuber can do. Maybe play a bit of both sides of this one, but 1.4 points a minute and 0 points per minute inside the distance. And I think that went all 15 minutes. Yeah, the fight went all 15 minutes. He didn't even score a tenth of a point inside the distance. Daniel Zellhuber, the golden boy. So he will have 4 inches of height. This fight's also at lightweight, so Vannata is moving up. His last fight was at featherweight, it looks like. He's been fighting at featherweight. Mike Grundy and Charles Jourdain, but before that, DKC, Medeiros, and Bobby Green were all at lightweight. So going back up to his weight class, I like Lando Vannata here at 31 years old, going against the young guy with no UFC win so far in Zellhuber. I think this one could be interesting, and if Zellhuber wins, it could actually tell us a little bit about him, because we got nothing out of that first fight against Trey Ogden, except for the fact that he scored 0 points per minute inside the distance. That is a huge red flag, and yeah, I'll be looking for some improvements here for Daniel Zellhuber, but give me groovy Vannata for the win. Fight! And here we have a strawweight fight between Piera Rodriguez, the undefeated Piera Rodriguez, 9-0 as a pro, 2-0 in the UFC, and 1-0 in 3-round strawweight fights. She's 30 years old this week. Not this week, I don't know why I said that, with a 10.86 ass whoop index. Fantastic for a strawweight, and she is the underdog here, going against Jillian Robertson, $8,200. Robertson, let's see, 11-7 as a pro, 8-5 in the UFC, 2-3 in her last 5, and she is moving down to strawweight for the first time in her UFC career, guys. So if you'll notice right below me at the very bottom of the screen, it says exact record, 0-0. She has yet to fight at strawweight. So these are her UFC career stats that I have on the screen. Let's take a look there first. Over 3 points per minute, very good. At distance, leaves something to be desired, but what do you expect from Jillian Robertson? That's not really her game. Over 3.5 points per minute. Inside the distance, allowing less than 2 is just what we're looking for out of Robertson. 101 points per win, and when she loses, she scores less than 20, but allows 89. 2.28 significant strikes landed per minute. Her takedown defense is god-awful, but again, she does not mind being on the ground. In fact, she spends 65% of her total fight time fighting inside the distance and controls over 2/3 of that fight time. Has a high ceiling of 110, very low floor. 3 of her 8 UFC wins, she has scored over 100 points. So that is good for, I guess I was going to say a strawweight, but for a flyweight, which is where most of her fights have taken place. Averages 67 bonus points per win. 72 strength of schedule is very good, and has made the optimal lineup in one of her last 4 UFC fights since 2021. So the stats there aren't terrible. At distance, you get what you get with Jillian Robertson. She's not the most prolific striker, but on the ground and in jiu-jitsu and whatnot, she definitely should have an edge here over Rodriguez. That said, and surprisingly, Jillian Robertson, if I asked you to tell me how old Jillian Robertson is, would you have said 27 years old? I might have said 30. That's no disrespect to Jillian Robertson. She has, let's see, 18 pro fights and 13 UFC fights. I mean, how many 27-year-olds have 13 UFC fights? Maybe Makayev and Rosas will get there, but yeah, very interesting. I didn't realize that. Let's go over to the Pieta Rodriguez side. 4.2 points per minute, allows just 2 back at her. This is in her 1 strawweight fight. I assume one of her opponents missed weight, and so it was at catchweight. Let me just go check that. Yeah, Sam Hughes was at strawweight. Kay Hansen was her debut opponent. Kay Hansen missed weight by a few pounds, so that one was at catchweight. So we just have the Sam Hughes stats here. At distance, she got outscored, but inside the distance, Pieta Rodriguez, 17.62 points per minute. This was over 15 minutes, guys. You went 15 minutes with Sam Hughes, scored 17 points per minute inside the distance, 5 takedowns, 13% control time. Just, rinse and repeat takedowns, basically. Ended up with 92, almost 93 points in that performance. 5.5 significant strikes landed per minute, 100% takedown defense. You kind of got to throw those stats out because it is only one fight. She did control 80% of the grappling time, scored 30 bonus points in her decision win. Strength of schedule, 8 points lower than Jillian Robertson. What do you expect, though? She only has 2 UFC fights, Pieta Rodriguez. She did make the optimal lineup against Sam Hughes with that 92-point performance. How much was she? She was only 7,600, scored 92 points, and did make the optimal lineup. So I love what I've been seeing out of Pieta Rodriguez. She looked great against Kay Hansen as well. She landed 3 takedowns there, controlled 35% of the fight time, landed 50 strikes in a 15-minute decision. But Jillian Robertson is no joke. She can catch you in a bad position for you at any time. And I assume this fight's going to the ground with the 17.6 points per minute scored by Rodriguez and the almost 4 points per minute inside the distance scored by Robertson. So it will be interesting to see who can get their game off. And like I said, surprised Robertson is 27 years old. Pieta Rodriguez is older here, 30 years old, only 9 professional fights. So this one could be sneaky interesting. Robertson is a decent finisher. Let's see. She just subbed Agapova. She subbed Cachoeira 2 fights before that. So a couple of subs in her last 5. Not too bad at all. In fact, her last 2 wins were both submissions. So we'll see if Pieta Rodriguez can keep that O, or we'll see if Jillian Robertson can get a couple of head and arm throws and possibly a submission. So I think this one's sneaky for DraftKings. Not sure how much I'll have of it, but I'll probably be over the field. Fight! And here we are, guys, the people's main event. What more do I have to say? We have Ed Herman going against Zach Cummings. That's right, you did not step into a time machine or fall asleep for 3 or 4 years. It is Ed Herman and Zach Cummings in the year 2023. This is a thing that's happening, and what's even more laughable about that is Zach Cummings is the most expensive fighter on this entire slate at 9,600. The dude hasn't fought in almost 1,000 days, over 2.5 years. His last fight was in 2020, August, almost September of 2020, against Alessio Di Chirico. 2020, Zach Cummings. And he's 38 years old. But his opponent is Ed Shortfuse Herman, who's 42 years old. In fact, closer to 43 nowadays than he is 42, to be quite honest. Zach Cummings does not have to deal with the weight cut as he usually does at middleweight. If you'll notice, his exact record is 0-0 because he's never fought at light heavyweight before. This is his first time. Meanwhile, Ed Shortfuse Herman, while having 25 UFC fights, has only 8 fights in 3-round light heavyweight. So 4-4 he is in those 8 fights. I mean, let's get into it. This is a shit show of a fight, guys. I mean, how could you possibly roster Zach Cummings at 9,600? He scores 3.3 points a minute, decent. 1.5 inside the distance is very poor. Over 3 inside the distance is okay. 86, almost 87 per win. And again, his exact record is 0-0 because he's never had a light heavyweight fight. So these are Zach Cummings' UFC stats as a whole. So as a whole, 86.66 points per win, terrible. He's giving up, when he loses, he only allows 65 points per win, which is ridiculously low. 3.28 strikes a minute, 60% takedown defense, controls less than half the grappling time he's in. Relatively okay ceiling, very low floor. That would be 3 of his 9 UFC wins over 100. 58 bonus points per win. 75 strength of schedule is pretty good. Like I said, has not fought since 2020, so of course he is 0-0 as far as times optimal. Again, 38 years old, guys, 9-4 in the UFC, 3-2 in his last 5. First time fighting at light heavyweight. I don't know what to do here because Ed Fuse looked better than he should have against Menefield. I mean, and that's Menefield, I feel like could have finished that several times over the course of that fight and just didn't. But that said, in his last 2 losses to Vannata, which was 2018, Vannata, and Menefield in 2021, they both went to decision. He's only been finished, let's see, in the UFC. Let's see, how many times has he been finished in the UFC? 6 times, 3 by KO, TKO, and 3 by submission for Ed Shortfuse Herman. I mean, his numbers are lackluster. 92 points per win, if that. This is in 3-round light heavyweight fights. Allows 90 when he loses. 4 strikes a minute. A terrible 33% takedown defense. That is god-awful. Where Jillian Robertson in the last fight, you don't mind if she's on the ground because her jiu-jitsu is fantastic. Ed Herman, you don't want to have Ed Herman at a 33% takedown defense. Controls just a third of the grappling time. Has a very low ceiling and a better floor than Cummings at 31.86. Half of his 4 light heavyweight wins, he has put up over 100. 59 points or bonus points per win. Excuse me. And then 65 strength of schedule, not good at all. 10 points lower than Zach Cummings. Did not make the optimal lineup in his one fight. Eligible at light heavyweight since 2021. This is a long way of saying I don't know how you could possibly play Zach Cummings unless you think he's going to wipe the floor with Ed Herman, which has not happened in a few years at this point. But also that could happen at any time because he's 42 years old and he looked washed after his last fight, or in his last fight against Menefield. That was well over a year ago, almost a year and a half, actually over a year and a half since that fight happened. He looked terrible in that fight, and now it's been a year and a half. But Zach Cummings hasn't fought in even longer, and he's 38. I don't know what to think about this fight. I don't know how you could possibly play Cummings. I'm going to play the salary voodoo here and probably just X him out. Can you X him out of your lineup, though, at 90? What if he just dumps Ed Herman in the first freaking minute? Like, obviously, that's probably not going to happen. What's his power index? Second highest on the card. Oh, God. Ed Herman's Chindex is one of the lowest on the card. I guess give me a little bit of Cummings, like 10, 15%. Oh, God. Excuse the alarm. 10, 15%. Ed Herman, if I need a punt play, I will probably throw him in. Because if he goes to decision, he could score 30 points at 6,600. That's not terrible. And if he gets, some kind of decision, 2-1 over Cummings at 6,600 and a win, he's most likely making the optimal lineup. So give me some Herman. Give me a tiny bit of Zach Cummings as well. I hate this fight. It's going to be the opposite of a barn burner. And here we've got a flyweight banger between Mateusz Nicolau and Brandon Royval. I'm very excited for this fight. Nicolau at 9,100, 7-1 in the UFC, 4-1 in his last 5, and 6-1 in 3-round flyweight fights. Our guy is 30 years old, over 3 points a minute as far as his overall pacing. 2.5 points a minute at distance, but inside the distance, it's 3-1. 4.42 points per minute compared to 1.34 allowed per minute. DKP per win is a little lackluster in these 7 flyweight fights. 6 flyweight wins, he's averaging 81.38 points per win. That is just not going to get it done, especially at 9,100. That's not even 10x, so I am pretty worried about that, to be quite honest. And when Nicolau lost, he gave up 103 points, 3.76 points a minute, 93% takedown defense, fantastic. Controls 71% of the grappling time. 2 of his 6 wins over 100 points. Only 36 bonus points per win, though, and a less than 70 strength of schedule. Has yet to make the optimal lineup since 2021. I think Mateusz Nicolau is a very exciting fighter. I love to watch him fight. He's a fantastic fighter as well, just racking up win after win after win, as he is 19-2-1 professionally. But, man, he is a very poor DraftKings score. That is for sure. Let's check out Brandon Royval, the huge underdog at 7,100. Personally, I don't think you can ever count this guy out. He's always in exciting fights. Scores 2.85 points per minute in 3-round flyweight fights, in which, let's see, his UFC record is 4-2, and all of those have been 3-round flyweights. So he is also 4-2 in his exact record. 4 points a minute at distance, allowing 3.5. Inside the distance, he's getting worked over. It's the opposite of Nicolau, scoring 1.5 points per minute, giving up 5. Over 5 points a minute inside the distance. Scores only 90 per win, gives up 110 when he loses. So both of these guys not scoring very well in wins, but giving up well over triple digits in their losses. 3.32 strikes landed per minute, an extremely subpar 40% takedown defense. Spends almost 60% of his time fighting inside the distance. Brandon Royval controls just 22% of that time. So that is a huge red flag. The possibility for Nicolau to just lay and pray, get some takedowns, get some control time before Royval can scramble back up. And maybe we get, a few Nicolau takedowns, which would be fantastic for his DraftKings score. He has not landed more than 1 takedown in his last 3 fights. He landed 2 against M.O.N.K, scored only 70 points in that split decision win. So just not scoring well at all. In fact, only one of his, that was Nicolau, I should say. Royval, on the other side, only one of his 4 UFC wins he's put up over triple digits, 65 bonus points per win on average. A very, very good, in fact, the best strength of schedule we've seen so far in this video by far. 77.24 strength of schedule. I mean, listen to the guys he's fought in his last 5. Matt Schnell, meh. Bontarine, meh. But before that, it was Alejandro Pantoja, Brandon Moreno, and Kai Kara France. So this dude has been fighting some people. He's been put through the ringer, and he beat one of those guys. He beat Kai Kara France. I believe he finished him. Is that true? Subbed him in the second round, yeah. But, again, Royval with those very low scores on average, 0 of 3 optimal since 2021. So these guys together have had 7 chances to make the optimal lineup since 2021 and have failed 7 times. So I think this is going to be a great fight to watch. I will be fading this fight. I mean, the numbers, every single number here that I just read you tells you to fade this fight as a whole. I'll probably have a little bit more Royval than Nicolau, even though I do like Nicolau to win and I like him better as a fighter. But the upside for Royval is much higher than Nicolau, and it's not even that high to begin with. And he is much, much cheaper, 7,100 compared to 9,100. So I just can't back Nicolau scoring 90 points per win at $9,100. That is going to be rough. So you would think that he would finish Royval early if you're going to roster him. I think this one probably goes to decision. So I will be fading both sides would be my guess. So neither guy just scores very well at all. Fight! And here we've got a 3-round featherweight fight between Bill Algeo and TJ Brown. Algeo, the heavy favorite, $8,800 this week. He is 3-3 in the UFC and 3-3 in 3-round featherweight fights. All these 3s, and he's 33 years old. You absolutely love to see it, all you numerologists out there. 3.5 points per minute allows almost that number right back at him. Outscores an opponent at distance, getting outscored inside the distance. 2.77 points per minute to 4.5 is what he allows, Bill Algeo. That is a ton of points allowed per minute inside the distance. Scores 93 on average per win, and his opponents score 94 when he loses. His DraftKings points per loss, though, 46 points per loss is a pretty good number. But at 8,800, that's not really something that I am interested in. Let's see, almost 5 strikes per minute, 54% takedown defense is very subpar. Spends half of his total fight time inside the distance, controls less than half of the fight time. Pretty low ceiling, but his floor is very high, 52.75 floor. But at 8,800, I mean, that's not really a number we're looking for. Only one of his UFC wins he's put up triple digits. 78 strength of schedule so far, the best, the highest overall strength of schedule in his last 5 that we've seen, even a point higher than whoever the hell we just talked about in the last fight. His last 5 opponent record, a very respectable 57-11, and Bill Algeo has made the optimal lineup 1 out of 4 fights since 2021. So some decent numbers here, very even fights for the most part, as Bill Algeo's ass whoop index is exactly 1.00. A 0.00 would be every fight pretty much equates to a draw. So we are just barely over that point. So some very close fights for Bill Algeo and some decent numbers as well. But at 8,800, I'm not too interested in 93 points per minute. TJ Brown, 3-3 in the UFC, 2-2 in 3-round featherweight fights. So these are his stats for 3-round featherweight fights. He's 32 years old, switch stance fighter. Switch versus switch, actually, in this one. 4.24 points per minute, allows over 3, getting outscored at distance, but outscoring his opponents by over a point inside the distance. Again, per win, 91.59 points, and he's allowing just 91 points when he loses, scoring 56 points per loss. So neither of these guys score very well at all when they win, just over 90 points, which is really not something you're looking for, especially on the Algeo side at 8,800. At 7,400 for Brown, it's a little bit easier to swallow. But the thing that stands out to me here is both guys are scoring very well, even when they lose. So a lot of these fights are going to decision. Bill Algeo scoring 46, almost 47 points in 3 UFC losses. Here we have TJ Brown scoring 56, almost 57 points in his 2 UFC losses. So this could be an interesting fight to play for cash. I certainly don't mind that. And I will be probably a bit heavier on the Brown side just because he's $7,400. I mean, that's a huge difference between that and 8,800. As you can see here, Brown has a very low ceiling, but it is higher than Algeo's. But his floor is 73, which is ridiculous. 1 out of his 2 wins at the weight class has scored triple digits. He has a 71.5 strength of schedule, and he has made optimal lineup TJ Brown in 2 of his past 3 fights at featherweight since 2021. So these numbers are much more impressive than Algeo's numbers. I'm a bigger fan of Algeo. I will be rooting for Algeo to win. I like his fight style. I like watching him perform. But TJ Brown's numbers are fantastic for the salary that he's at, $7,400. There's a few categories here with tremendous upside. And for that reason, I'll probably have more Brown rostered than I will Algeo, even though I like Algeo for the win. But if Brown wins, gets a nice decision win here, you know, maybe some bad judging or something, you never know what could happen at that price tag. So give me some Brown, and I'll probably be fading Algeo, even though I really like to watch him fight. His scores just are not doing it for me. Next fight, we've got another 3-round lightweight banger between Rafa, don't call me Hafa, Garcia, going against, what else could you call this guy? UFC veteran, the veteran of all veterans, Clay Guida. Clay Guida's second lowest salaried fighter this week, $6,700. He is 18-16 in the UFC, but in 3-round lightweight fights, he is 15-11. So we've got 26 fights to go off of for stats here for this one. You absolutely love to see that. And his numbers aren't bad, Clay Guida. 3.65 points per minute is what he is scoring, allowing less than 2. I was going to say, let's see. Yeah, all 5 of his last 5 fights have been at lightweight. Clay Guida getting outpaced at distance, but inside the distance, it's like 3-1. Better than that. 4.6 points a minute to 1.38 is all he allows, scoring 96 points per win. That is over 15. Again, 15 UFC wins. And when he loses, he's allowing only 83 points. Less than 3 strikes landed per minute. 72% takedown defense. Controls 83% of the grappling time. That is a fantastic number. Both of these guys controlling well over 80% of the grappling time, so this one could be interesting. Decent ceiling, a very high floor of 56.88. Let's see, 5 of his 15 wins, 3-round lightweight fights, have been over triple digits with an average of 50 bonus points per win. Strength of schedule is 71, but he has yet to make the optimal lineup since 2021, guys. 0 of 5 chances. And like we see that DKP per win at 9,600. What has been his salary lately? He was 76 against Hot Sauce, 82 against Puella, 74, 71, 74. So he is far cheaper than any of his past 5 salaries, which I don't mind here. But the $6,700 salary is god-awful for a little thing I like to call salary voodoo. If you don't know, let's see, where is the stat? Twice, $6,700 has made the optimal lineup. It has been used 39 times since January 1st, 2021. That has an optimal rate of 5.13%, by far the lowest out of any salary you could play. Yes, even 6,600. That is correct. 2 of 39. So guys, if you like trends, you like odds and whatnot, plus 41 years old for Clay Guida, I've got to fade this guy. I absolutely have to fade him. I like Rafa Garcia here. 2-3 in 3-round lightweight fights. Only 28 years old. 3.5 points per minute. But inside the distance, I mean, again, a 3-1 almost. 6.23 points scored to 2.29. Scores 104 per win. Allows only 77 per loss. I mean, scores more than half a strike per minute on Guida, 76% takedown defense, 87% of grappling time controlled. I mean, some great numbers here. 64 is his floor. One out of his, two lightweight wins, he scored triple digits. 72 strength of schedule, blah, blah, blah. Where Clay Guida was 0-5 of times optimal, Rafa Garcia is 2 of 5. Now, what has Rafa Garcia's salaries been? 84, 71, 82, 77, and 95. He has been $9,500 before. Lost to Chris Gritzmacher. And I believe Gritzmacher, that might have been the very first fight ever that $6,700 made the optimal lineup. So, yeah, Rafa Garcia had some very bad luck when he was 9,500 before. I think that could change this time. I mean, Guida's numbers are okay, but the age, I mean, what else? The 0-5 times optimal and the 96 per win. That's actually not bad at 6,700. I might have to roster a little bit of Clay Guida, man. You never know what you're going to get. Even at 41 years old, this guy can still get it done. So, I mean, I'm probably picking Rafa Garcia. I mean, by probably, I mean I'm definitely picking Rafa Garcia, and I'll probably have a bunch of him rostered as well. But, man, 104 points per win is pretty good. What's he scoring per decision win? 94, almost 95. Not great, but not terrible. So give me some Rafa Garcia, even at the high price of 9,500. I don't know how much Clay Guida I'm going to be able to get to. That said, I mean, I hate the $6,700 salary, but that said, the guy is never dead. So you just can't count him out. His ass whoop index is 8.93. That's a fantastic number, especially for a 41-year-old guy. So give me Garcia for the win, but I'm going to have both sides of this one. Probably not a ton of Guida, though. That $6,700 salary, I just hate it. Fight! Here we've got another 3-round bantamweight banger between the legend killer Chris Gutierrez going against Pedro Munhoz. Some may consider him almost a legend, so I'd be kind of worried if I was him this week going against Gutierrez. 9,400 for Gutierrez. It sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, and I'll tell you why. Although I like Gutierrez to win and probably finish this fight inside the distance, he is the opposite of what you want to see as far as DraftKings scoring goes. 2.54 points per minute. Oh, I should be mentioned, he is 5-1-1 in 3-round bantamweight fights. 4-0-1 in his last 5. 2.5 points per minute, so outscoring his opponent, but just barely. 2-1 at distance. 2.82 to 1.16, so he is shutting shit down at distance. Inside the distance, he's getting pieced up 3-1 basically. 1.64 to 3.67. And going against Pedro Munhoz, that is not ideal. Gutierrez, here we go. DraftKings points per win over 5 3-round bantamweight wins, 79.73. And when he has lost, he gave up 113. So less than 80 points is what Gutierrez is averaging per over 5 wins, I should say. And he is $9,400 this week, guys. That is a bit much. 4.5 strikes landed per minute, 75 takedown defense. Controls only 24% of all grappling time he's involved in. Very, very low ceiling, not even triple digits. Only one of his 5 wins at bantamweight has been triple digits. 70.9 strength of schedule, and he has only made the optimal lineup 1 out of 3 times since 2021. So I like Gutierrez to get the win here, I think, but his DraftKings scoring is it's one of the lowest on the entire card. So I don't know how I can really back him here at the extremely high price of $9,400. Meanwhile, Pedro Munhoz, $6,800. That said, I'm not on the dog this week at all. Outscoring his opponent, getting outscored at distance, but inside the distance, Munhoz is scoring 6.37 points per minute, allowing just 4.22. He has 15 fights at 3-round bantamweight. 9-6 is his record. On those 9 wins, he averaging less than 100 points, 98.97, which usually I would say no thank you to, but at 6,800, that's pretty good. So if you like Pedro Munhoz this week, I wouldn't mind playing him at 6,800. I don't. I think Gutierrez is going to get the win. I think he could possibly be parlay worthy. But that said, I'm not going to have a ton of him in DraftKings. Munhoz lands 5.2 strikes a minute, 83% takedown defense, controls 67.5% of the grappling time, but spends only 9% of his total fight time fighting at distance. Ceiling is 117, so 20 points higher than Gutierrez, and a decent floor as well at 41. 6 of his 9 wins, he has put up over 100 points. with an average of almost 68 bonus points per win. One of the best strength of schedules on the entire card, if not the best. I can't remember if someone is higher. I think there might be one person higher, but I don't know. 78.49 is a very good strength of schedule. His last 5 opponents, pro record 124-31, and he has also made the optimal lineup in one of his past 3 fights. Munhoz's last 5 is Frankie Edgar, Jimmy Rivera, Jose Aldo, Dominic Cruz, and Sean O'Malley. So compare that to Durden, Ewell, Kalarish, Dana Batgary, and Frankie Edgar. We don't really have much of a comparison. It's obviously Munhoz with the much tougher schedule. But that said, 36 years old, he kind of is on the decline. Gutierrez is 31 years old, but is showing no signs of slowing down. In fact, only sharpening his game. I really like him here. I think he gets Pedro Munhoz. I don't know if he gets him out of there, but I think he wins this fight more often than he doesn't. 9,400, it's going to be really difficult to roster him at 80 points per win, but I don't mind him for cash. And like I said, I don't probably mind him as a parlay piece. Also, El Guapo, fantastic nickname. Pedro Munhoz, the young Punisher, not so young anymore these days, although he is younger than me. I'm definitely not calling myself young, but maybe we'll just go with the Punisher from here on out. Fight! The Hulk has returned. Ion Cutelaba, $8,400 this week. 3-round light heavyweight fight against a guy that's moving down from heavyweight. Has had some bad luck lately. 2-3 in his last 5. 4-4 in the UFC. Tanner Boser has no fights at light heavyweight, so all the stats you see on the screen are his UFC career. Let's start with the dog here, 7,800. What do you get with Tanner Boser? I always want to pick him, but he never, ever scores well. 2.3 points a minute, 2.18 at distance, only 1.2 inside the distance, and he's getting, outscored 3-1 inside the distance for the most part. Doesn't really give up a ton of points, though, overall, but scores only 89 points per win. This is over 4 UFC wins, guys. When he does lose, he only gives up 62 points, so there might not be a ton of points here in this one. But as you know, Cutelaba is a wild man, and anything could happen between his fight IQ and his power. Holy shit, you got to have this guy in your rosters. He'll either make or break you, so I feel like you got to play him and his opponent. Let's get back to Boser. 4.2 points a minute, 65% takedown defense, controls only 11.5% of all grappling time. Only one of his 4 wins, he's scored triple digits. 66 strength of schedule and has only made optimal once since 2021. I'm interested to see how Boser looks at. He was always a smaller heavyweight. I'm interested to see how he looks at light heavyweight. I mean, Cutelaba's been here forever. Boser's moving down. Was never a really good DraftKings player before that. I'm probably going to end up fading him. I just don't think he's the dog that I'm going to be focusing on this week. Cutelaba, let's look at some of his numbers, which are some of them are crazy low, but some of them are off the freaking charts. 4.2 points a minute. Gets outscored at distance by about 0.2 of a point. But inside the distance, he scores almost 7 points a minute, giving up only 2.39. 110 per win. And I should mention, in 3-round light heavyweight fights, Cutelaba is 5-8-1. That's the same as his UFC record. In his last 3, he is 1-3 with 1 draw. So not the best, but over 5 UFC wins at light heavyweight. 110 per win. 93 is what he gives up when he loses. 4.43 strikes a minute landed. 77.5% takedown defense, controls 6 times more of the grappling time than Tanner Boser, 63%. Has a very high ceiling, one of the highest on the entire card, 133.38. Decent floor. 4 of his 5 UFC wins at light heavyweight has scored 100 points or more. That is a very important category. 71 points per win, I should say. 73 strength of schedule, and he has also made the optimal lineup just once since 2021. But as I said, he is 1-3-1 in his last fight. So his 1 win, he did make the optimal lineup. I love Cutelaba's potential way more, immensely more than I love Tanner Boser. Boser's like down here as far as his DraftKings numbers. He's going to have to get an early finish on Cutelaba. I don't know that he's gotten an early finish on anyone. He finished Oven St. Preux halfway through the second round. He finished Rafael Pessoa halfway through the second round. So he's got power. Cutelaba has a not great chin at all. So there is a chance that Boser could connect here, but Cutelaba's a fucking wild man. I mean, who the Boser's fought fights like Cutelaba? Absolutely nobody. Orlovsky, has the pace of a Derek Lewis. Ilir Latifi, same thing. Oven St. Preux, Rodrigo Nascimento, yeah, none of these guys are anything close to what Ian Cutelaba is. Also, Boser actually has to cut weight this time. I'm going with Cutelaba here. I'm hoping he gets a rebound fight. I like him at $8,400. He could really like break the. He could score over 120 points again, guy. That would be insane for $8,400. He would assuredly make the optimal lineup. And yeah, Boser, has he been finished? Has Boser ever been finished in the UFC? It doesn't look like it. He's only been finished once in his career. It was by a KO TKO. But yeah. I'm liking Cutelaba's upside here, and I'll have significantly more of him rostered than I will Tanner Boser. Fight! Next fight, we've got another light heavyweight fight here between Dustin Jacoby and Azamat Murzakanov. Let's start with the Jacoby side. $8,900 this week. He is 6-3-1 in the UFC, 4-1 in his last 5. 5-1-1 in 3-round light heavyweight fights with the organization. 35 years old here, but has a significant height and reach advantage over Murzakanov. Jacoby scores very well per minute. I mean, outscoring his opponent everywhere except for inside the distance. He's scoring 3.3 points a minute there, which is good, but he's allowing 8 points a minute inside the distance. When he wins, he puts up 100. That is over 5 UFC wins, and 64 points is all he's giving up in his one UFC loss, in which he scored 48.5 points. Jacoby, 7.5 strikes per minute. Not surprising for a kickboxer. 48% takedown defense. Again, not surprising for a kickboxer. Controls only 50% of the grappling time he's involved in. 113-point ceiling, decent floor. 3 of his 5 UFC wins at light heavyweight, over 100 points. And he's getting 66 points of bonus points per win, I should say. Almost 70 strength of schedule, but not quite. So it leaves a little bit to be desired. And Jacoby has made the optimal lineup twice in 6 fights at light heavyweight since 2021. Those aren't bad numbers. He's outpacing his opponents pretty much everywhere and has a decent, triple-digit DraftKings points per win average. Meanwhile, Murzakanov, 12-0 professionally, a perfect record, 2-0 in the UFC and 2-0 at light heavyweight. Outpacing his opponents absolutely everywhere, and it's not really close, especially when you look at the inside the distance numbers. 7.14 points a minute to less than 1 is what he allows. When he does win 2 UFC fights at light heavyweight, 84.39 points. That is not great, but at 7,300, you could ask for a lot worse. No losses so far. 4.86 strikes landed per minute. No one's attempted a takedown on him, so we don't know what his takedown defense is like. But he does control 86.62% of all grappling time he's involved in. 96-point floor, which is very low. 45 bonus points per win. 67 strength of schedule, which is a few points less than Dustin Jacoby. But he has made the optimal lineup in 1 out of his past 2 fights. Let's see, that would have probably been the Devin Clark fight, in which he was $8,400. And he scored 96 points. So 2 decision wins, actually 2 KO wins. The first one was the 3rd round flying knee from M.O.N.K, and then he finished Devin Clark also in the 3rd round. Man, I think this one's going to be kind of sneaky. I don't know if I really like it for DraftKings, but at 7,300, if Azamat gets even another 3rd round finish, he could score decently well, maybe in the 80s or 90s, and has the possibility of making another optimal lineup. Jacoby's probably the pick. He kind of surprised me in a good way against, let's see, Dawoon Jung. Lost to Khalil Roundtree in a crazy split decision there, in which I thought he won that fight, but so do the stats. But it is what it is. Got a win over Michael Oleksiejczyk, John Alon, and Darren Stewart. I like Dustin Jacoby. I like his extreme height advantage and reach advantage that he's going to have here on Murzakanov. But I'm interested to see if Murzakanov can, get him down at all with Jacoby's 48% takedown defense. So I like this fight. I think it could be sneaky. Jacoby is a bit overpriced in my opinion. So that could create some leverage on Murzakanov for us. Probably will have a little bit of him rostered at 7,300. Why wouldn't I? I mean, a perfect undefeated fighter, 2-0. Jacoby, got robbed in his last fight, but is looking really good overall. I'll have a bit of Murzakanov, but I'll probably have a bit of Jacoby as well, just in case. But really, I think this probably goes all 3. And if that's the case, I'd want to be on the Murzakanov side because Jacoby scores only 85 points per decision win. And at 8,900, that is not going to be anywhere close to what we need for the optimal lineup. So give me a little bit of Jacoby, probably Jacoby for the win, but I might actually pick Murzakanov as one of the one of the very few dogs that I see on this card. So I'll have a little bit of him rostered as well. And what I think is this line is too wide. Fight! And we've done it. The co-main event of the evening. We've got fan favorite Billy Quarantillo going against Edson Barboza. This should be an extremely exciting fight, but I'm really only favoring one side for DraftKings, guys. And let's start with Barboza, 7,500. He is the dog this week, 16-11 in the UFC, 2-3 in his last 5, but only 2-2 in 3-round featherweight fights. He has spent most of his career up at lightweight. So we're still down at featherweight here. 2-2 for Mr. Barboza at featherweight. He's getting outstruck overall. At distance, he's outscoring his opponents by over a point per minute. Inside the distance, he's scoring less than 1 point a minute and allowing 4.19 points in that category. Not a good look, especially against Billy Q. 80 points per win over his 2 UFC wins at featherweight. Not going to get it done even at $7,500, and he's allowing almost 100 when he loses. 4 points a minute, 4 strikes landed per minute for Edson Barboza. A 43% takedown defense is god-awful. Controls only 17.5% of the grappling time. Barboza, obviously a striker, known as a striker, not so much of a takedown or ground threat as you would expect. Has a decent floor of 46 points. Has yet to put up a triple-digit score in a win at featherweight. Only 37.5 bonus points per win. 77 strength of schedule is absolutely fantastic. And he has made the optimal lineup in 1 out of his past 2 fights at featherweight. So the numbers for Barboza are okay. DraftKings points per win is far from okay. 80.17. I'm pretty fucking far from okay. What movie is that from? I can't remember. Reservoir Dogs? Can't remember. Say the words. Say the goddamn words. You're going to be okay. That's what Barboza is saying to his DraftKings points per win number at 80 points. So, yeah, I might have to fade Barboza here. Just not looking good lately. 7,500 is a bit too much. 37 years old as well, which is not too old, but it's not exactly young either. Meanwhile, Billy Q has one of the highest upsides for DraftKings on the entire card. 5-2 in the UFC, 4-2 in 3-round featherweight fights. 34 years old, is going to be a bit shorter and less reach than Barboza, but I think he makes up for it. Outscoring his opponents, tremendously. 5.5 points a minute is what Billy Q puts up, while allowing 4, which is also a crazy number. At distance, both of these numbers are extremely high, and inside the distance, he's outpacing his opponents as well. 4.34 to 3.14, scoring 126.75 per win. That is over 4 3-round featherweight wins. 126, almost 127. When he loses, he's giving up 119 and scoring 60. So he scores very well in wins, very well in losses. Also, 8.21 significant strikes per minute, by far, I think the highest number we've seen so far in this video. 61% takedown defense, which is not good, but you're not going to see a ton of takedown looks from Edson Barboza. Controls 62% of the grappling time. Has one of the highest ceilings on the card at 138 and probably the highest floor as well at 75, almost 76 points. All 4 of his UFC wins at featherweight have been triple digits. 57.5 bonus points, 73 strength of schedule, has made optimal 2 of 3 times since 2021 at the weight class. Every single number I just read you is fantastic for Billy Q. I think he has one of the highest upsides on the entire card. I think $8,700 is a cheap price for these numbers, especially against Edson Barboza, who could fall apart. I'm not saying he will, but he has lost to Giga Chikadze, Bryce Mitchell, and Dan Ige in his last 5, only beating Amir Khani and Shane Burgos, which was that crazy knockout, 3rd round knockout back in 2021. But he fought Chikadze in August of 2021 and Bryce Mitchell in March of 2022. So it's been over 400 days since Edson Barboza fought. Fart? I don't know the last time he fought. I don't know if he has an OnlyFans. I don't know if he does stuff like that. I'll tell you what, I'm not subscribed though. Maybe I should remedy that. Edson Barboza, what was I going to say? I have no idea. I like Billy Q here. The huge DraftKings upside. His numbers are through the roof. Even in a loss, his floor is 75. He scores 60 in a loss. I absolutely love it. I think Barboza possibly could get finished here. And I'm loving what I see out of the Billy Q side of things recently. So give me Billy Q at 8,700. There could be a possibility to have fantastic value on that number. Fight! Main event, UFC Kansas City between Max Blessed Holloway going against Arnold Allen, 5-round featherweight fight. These numbers are crazy. Max Holloway, 9K this week, 23-7 as a pro, 19-7 in the UFC, 2-3 in his last 5, but in 5-round featherweight fights, 7-3 record. So not too bad. The 3, I assume, are all losses to Alex Volkanovski. So against the rest of the crew in 5-round fights, he is 7-0. Let's take a look at some of these numbers. To be honest, he's only 31 years old with 30 pro fights. My goodness. Blessed Holloway getting it done. Outscoring his opponents overall, 3.85 to 2.59. At distance, outscoring them. Inside the distance, outscoring them. Granted, he is giving up almost 4 points a minute, but he's scoring well over 5 points a minute inside the distance. When he wins, guys, 7 5-round featherweight fights. In 7 5-round featherweight fights, 132.55 is what he is averaging per win. 103.68 is what he allows per loss, and he scores 51 in those 3 losses on average to Alexander Volkanovski. Lands 8.71 strikes per minute, highest number on the card. 85.5% takedown defense, other than Nicolau, probably the highest number on the card. Spends only 10.25% of his total fight time fighting inside the distance, but he controls 52.5% of that fight time. His ceiling is easily the highest out of any ceiling we've covered so far. 174.38 in a 5-round featherweight fight. A very high floor as well. 5 of 7 5-round featherweight fights. Max Holloway has put up triple digits. 5 out of 7. 71.43%. Average bonus points of just about 44, 45. By far the highest strength of schedule on the entire card at 84.16. Usually you see like 76, 77, 78. You're like, holy crap, this guy or girl has a fantastic strength of schedule. Max Blessed Holloway's at 84. But that's what happens when you fight, Alex Volkanovski 3 times, Yair Rodriguez, and Calvin Kattar. Last 5 opponents record 113-16, and Holloway has made the optimal lineup in 5-round featherweight fights 2 out of 3 times since January 1st of 2021. Guys, these numbers are fantastic. I mean, you don't have to, have me tell you, but Max Holloway is one of the best DraftKings players that you could probably play. And at 9K, there's 3, 4, 5 fighters that are more expensive than him this week. And Holloway probably has the single best upside on the entire card. So am I going to be rostering him? Absolutely. I don't think he's too expensive at all. 9K is a very good salary to play. And Holloway at 132.5 points per win, absolutely give me some Max Holloway. So, man, I like that side of things. I also don't mind the Arnold Allen side of things, even though when you look at the numbers, it leaves a bit to be desired. But it's Arnold Allen, and this is a 5-round featherweight fight. As you can see, 19-1 for Allen professionally, 10-0 in the UFC. Only 1 5-round featherweight fight in the UFC. So these stats are just from that 1 5-round featherweight fight. He is 1-0 in such fights, and that would have been against Calvin Kattar. Is that correct? Yeah, looks like Calvin Kattar. Yeah, that would have been the 5-round fight. He finished him in the 2nd round. I believe it was an injury of some kind, shoulder or knee. I really can't remember at the moment. But Allen, not great pacing numbers, outscoring his opponents everywhere, and his defense is phenomenal. He allows 1.09 points per minute overall, 1.18 at distance, and 0.0 inside the distance. And this was over 10.5 minutes of fight time. He allowed 0.00 points. Only scored 81.89 in that win, so that definitely leaves something to be desired. But Arnold Allen is $7,200 this week, guys. He's $1,200 under his average salary. He has no UFC losses. Obviously, he's 1-0 in 5-round featherweight fights. 5.5 strikes landed per minute. Did not have a takedown attempted on him by Kattar. Controlled 100% of what very little grapple time there was in that fight. 70 bonus points. It was a 2nd-round win. His strength of schedule is 72.5. He has failed to make the optimal lineup in 5-round featherweight fights up to this point. Only one, obviously. And he only scored 82 points in that one. So what was his salary? He was $8,200. So he's $1,000 under his previous salary. And man, I like Max Holloway as much as the next guy. I will have a ton of this fight as a whole. I will have a ton. Usually I would fade Arnold Allen, but he's so freaking cheap this week at $7,200. How could you possibly fade him? If he gets a win, especially inside the distance over Holloway, which I do not expect, but if he gets a win or if this goes all 5, Arnold Allen could score through the roof. I don't even mind a stack on this fight, and you know I don't really play stacks at all. But if this goes all 5, I mean, what are we looking? If Holloway wins, he could put up 110, 120, and Allen in a loss could put up 50. That's not terrible. Not terrible at all. And Holloway has potential to score way more than that. He also has potential to score 70 or 60 in a loss, and Arnold Allen get the decision on him. So I don't even mind the stack here, to be quite honest. I don't mind either side. Actually, for cash, I might avoid it. But for GPPs, I absolutely love this fight. This will likely be my highest owned fight out of all of them, and I am extremely excited to see this one take place. With that said, guys, we are done with the card, and let's throw it to Monk to see who CM Monk picked for UFC Kansas City. Thank you, Monk. It is me, Monk, the Monkmatician, here with CM Monk's picks for UFC Kansas City. And here they are. We're not messing around, guys. A bunch of underdogs. Yellow means underdogs. We've got Jocelyn Edwards by decision over Pudilova. We've got newcomer Gaston Bolanos. I always want to say Boyanos, but it's Bolanos by decision over Aaron. We've got Bruno Brasil, the best name to say on the entire card, by finish over Gomes. We've got Lando Vannata beating Zellhuber, starting his UFC career at 0-2 by decision. Piera Rodriguez over Robertson by decision. I don't mind that play. We've got Zach Cummings by finish over Ed Herman. That's going to be a laugh fest. Mateusz Nicolau by finish over Royval. Interesting. Bill Algeo by decision over Brown. We've got Rafa Garcia. Don't call me Hafa Garcia by decision over Clay Guida. We've got Chris the Legend Killer Gutierrez by decision over Munhoz. We've got Ian Cutelaba over Tanner Boser by finish. We've got underdog Azamat Murzakanov by finish over Dustin Jacoby. Maybe another third round finish. I bet the odds on that are crazy high right now. Billy Quarantillo by finish over Edson Barboza. Love that play. And CM Monk picking Arnold Allen by decision over Max Holloway. We'll see if Arnold Allen's defense can stop the extremely potent offense of Max Holloway, but that is how CM Monk picks it. If you don't know, CM Monk is the guy right below me. He has a computer for a head, and he picks all of the fights based on pretty much strictly stats, like 400 and some data points. It's absolutely crazy. I can't believe it even works, and we're at like 65% on the year, so I should update that stat, and I'll have that for you next week. Let's throw it over to finish the show off with Monk's pick of the week. And let's finish it up, guys. The Monk pick of the week, the most owned, no nonsense pick of the week. It's been a rough go lately. My goodness, it's been rough. But our pick for UFC Kansas City is Billy Quarantillo, $8,700 this week. I absolutely love the upside of Billy Q over Edson Barboza. I think he has a great chance to not only win, but to finish the fight. His DraftKings numbers are second only to Max Holloway, in my opinion, as far as potential and ceiling. And Billy Q, I think, could potentially start a streak right here. Let's get 2 in a row for Mr. Billy Q, and we'll keep it going, man. I love Billy Q in this spot. I think he scores well over 100 points in a win, and I think he has a great shot of making the optimal lineup. Guys, let's finish the video out and get you right on out of here. All right, we did it. That's going to do it for UFC Kansas City Game Theory. Hopefully I gave you all of the pertinent information that you need to construct your GPP and cash lineups for this weekend's card. 14-fight banger of a card on a non-pay-per-view week. We've got some great fights, man. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, Ian Cutelaba could break the slate easily. We've got Billy Q fight. Max Holloway fights are always fun to watch. I don't know why I'm recapping it like this for you. We already talked about all this. I want to thank you very much for hanging out with me for like what I assume is about an hour once I get this edited down. Maybe a little longer. So many fights this week, but thanks a lot for hanging with me. Be sure to stick around. I should have some more content coming. I am moving across the country next week. I am moving 1,000 miles away, so I will do my absolute best to keep the content going. But it could be a rough week next week. As I record this, it is the 12th. So I'll probably be to my destination sometime around the 19th or so. Maybe the 18th. And I'll be set up around then. So hopefully I'll try to keep up with some content. But it's going to be a crazy week, guys. I hope you have a crazy week of winning bets and stacking DFS tickets all the way, sky high, as high as you can go, baby. Let's get that money this week. UFC Kansas City. There's only one thing left to do, guys. I hope you all enjoy the fight. So, enjoy, and we will see you in the next one.